How y'all doing tonight? CJ Moto, and I'm back, and I got the EB48.4 here. Got that hobby wing motor in there. I wanted to take this opportunity to go over RC differentials. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about it, and I'm going to talk kind of slow and try to be thoughtful and try not to give you any misinformation. I'm not an expert on differentials, and in my opinion, there's not a lot of guys that are. People just kind of go off what a setup sheet says, and they don't take the time to understand a lot of this stuff. I'm not telling you everyone's in that boat, but you know, in RC, there's this thing that I feel like some people are scared to say they don't know, because they're just like, they feel like everyone needs to know everything, and it's just not the case. These differentials are not simple. I mean, they are simple devices, but I don't know, maybe I'm just stupid, but it takes a while to really understand a lot about them, and I've just recently started to really become more and more interested in them, and that's one of the reasons that I like electric like this, because it gives you more time. Unless it's your full-time job doing this, if you were worried about your motor and everything, and everything else that goes along with nitro, it would be even more challenging to take the time to study this stuff. I'm not saying people don't do it, but I hope you enjoy this video, and I might do a series. I know I say that a lot, but these things are very complicated. So let me just be basic about a diff real quick if you're still following. This is a differential. This is a center differential. So I'm not going to assume anyone knows anything really. I'm going to try not to. So this is the differential. It goes right here in the center. And then you have a differential in the case in the front and the case in the rear. And you have all different types of fluids that go in these. Everywhere from 3,000 weight to 10,000, 100,000. All kinds of different weights of fluid. And I've been experimenting recently because in my Tekno buggy I had 7,000 in the front, 7,000 in the center, and 5,000 in the rear. Now, typically, you're always going to have, it's almost definite, you're going to have a lighter weight diff fluid in the rear. Let's explain what this does. So your diff sits like this with your drive shafts. So I got two drive shafts. One of them just a little short, stumpy one for a Tekno. But your center diff sits like that in your drive shafts. And then when your motor turns that spur gear, the tire with the least resistance, so this is your front, this is your rear, this is your front of the car on this car. So it's going to go like that, and we're facing that way. So as your car is going and the front wheels unload, if you have a lighter diff fluid, it's going to make that front wheel spin faster than the rear, because it's always going to send more revolutions with a lighter weight diff to the tire with the least resistance. So that's why you get the tire ballooning. You hit the gas and the tire balloons out. That's because there's not as much weight on that tire, not as much resistance, so it puts more power to that tire. If it puts 60% of the RPMs to that wheel, then it's always going to put 40% to the back. If your motor's spinning at 3,000 RPMs, how fast the front's spinning plus how fast the rear's spinning is always going to equal that RPM. So literally this plus this equals the RPM that it's spinning at completely. So if this one stops completely, then this one's going to be spinning all the RPMs of the motor, from my understanding at least. Your front wheels, your front and your rear of your car, are literally the same exact thing, except the gear looks different, and instead of it sitting like that, it's sitting like this, and you got a wheel on each side. And as you're turning, one wheel's spinning faster than the other. So if you have a lighter weight diff in the rear, it's going to allow your rear end to follow in the turns more. It's going to let the difference in RPMs from your left wheel and your right be greater. If it's heavier in the rear, those RPMs are going to stay the same, and the back end's kind of going to skip through the turn because they're not able to spin at different speeds as easily. So typically on a track, on a dirt track, you're going to want a lightweight diff fluid, whether it be 5,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 or 2,000. You're going to want a lightweight diff fluid in the rear end so those rear wheels can rotate more in the turns, and it allows them to move at different speeds. So that's a good general rule, lightweight in the rear. The center, the higher the diff fluid you have, the more they also spin at the same speed, and the less those front wheels unload. Because those front wheels aren't unloading, you're getting more RPMs to your rear wheels, which is making your car really have just crazy power, maybe do wheelies, spin out. So you're going to have less spinning out on the rear end if you have a lighter center diff fluid. On the front end of the car, to me it's the most complicated, or the most hard for me to understand. And basically, yeah, it's more challenging for me. I believe, I'm not even going to sit here and act like an expert on the front. For some reason, the front confuses me a little bit. I still got to learn more about that. But I have a very good understanding of the rear, more rotation in the turns. The center, you get more power and kind of less traction because you have more power. So if you're on a high bite track, you want to have a higher center diff fluid, typically. If you're on a low bite track, you want a lower center diff fluid. But yeah, the front, the front, I'm still trying to understand the front. And like I said, go ahead and tell me, teach me something. The lighter weight diff, I know that typically the front and the center, people usually run about the same. And then in the rear, they run lighter. Right now, I'm trying 6,000 in the front, 5,000 in the center, 3,000 in the rear. I'm going to try some different things out. But I'm still learning about what the front diff, tuning that front diff with lighter fluids, exactly what that does. I'm pretty sure if you have a lighter fluid in the front, you're going to get more steering out of the car. But once again, I'm just not an expert on that front diff yet. So anyhow, that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I understand about this stuff. But I really do want to learn more. Like I said, no one knows everything. So tell me in the comments, what exactly does the front differential do? And tell me if I'm doing something wrong with the rear or the center. And we can all learn together and talk about differentials, because I think they're a really good piece of this. In my mind, you have tires, number one, and then differentials right up there, and shocks are right up there. It's tires, probably shocks, and then diffs. Those are the three main things with racing. There's more to it. There's geometry and everything, but the top three, tires number one, and then whichever you want to pick, shocks and diffs for 2 and 3. And if you're not focused on tuning your diffs and you're not trying different things, then you might not get the optimal performance. And just because a pro racer wants to run 7.75 or 7.10.5 or 7.15.5, whatever's on their setup sheet, it doesn't mean that it's going to make you a faster driver, because guess what? We're probably not pro racers, are we? So it's good to find out what makes you yourself. If you have a heavy trigger finger like I do, then I've figured out that a lighter center diff suits me, because I kind of have a heavy trigger finger. The lighter center diff mellows the car out, and it doesn't, because if I'm on a heavy trigger finger and I got a really heavy center diff, then that rear end's going to be backing out on me all the time, slipping out on me. What's that do? That makes my lap time slower. So yeah, I got to have a lighter trigger finger, but also I could also make my car easier to drive for my driving style, because I might just enjoy being a little heavy on that trigger sometimes. If I want a lot of rotation in the corners, then I'm going to have a lighter rear diff. Hardly anyone runs a 3000 rear diff on a Tekno. I don't know if I'm going to like it or not, but I'm going to give it a whirl. And if I like it, who knows? Might be a little magic secret weapon. Anyhow, I'm going to get going. I'm going to put a little video here at the end of my car with this setup in it. This is on the road, but you can see it still has a ton of acceleration even with 5,000 in that center. Anyhow, hope y'all enjoyed this video. CJ Moto out.